Russia's president has likened the West's sanctions to declaring war and warned of dire consequences if NATO enforces a no-fly zone. But that's off the table for now. Multiple cities remain under attack from Russian forces encircling towns, with the number of Ukrainians forced to flee their country now numbering more than 1.4 million.
A proposed ceasefire has collapsed, with shelling raining down on the city of Mariupol. Elsewhere in Chernihiv, local media are reporting that a Russian military plane has been shot down, with Ukraine's defense claiming the pilot has been captured.
Around the world, protests continue. In Germany, a human chain of around 2,000 people formed in front of the Russian General Consulate, with red paint smeared on the front gates. Well, let's bring in reporter Sean Rubenstein-Dunlop, who is in the western city of Lviv in Ukraine. Hi there, Sean. Now, this ceasefire clearly doesn't appear to be holding.
That's right. A 5-hour ceasefire was due to be held today in the cities of Mariupol and Volnovakha in southeast Ukraine. That was to allow civilians to flee with the help of the Red Cross. But local officials in Mariupol said it barely lasted minutes. Within minutes, fierce shelling by the Russians resumed. They were shelling schools, kindergartens and buses that were meant to be evacuating civilians in that city of several hundred thousand. They were shelling positions along the escape route, so civilians were advised to stay in place. But there were terrifying pictures of people forced to take shelter in hallways and on the floor, and we saw smoke rising above apartment buildings across the city as that escape route was blocked. Russia accused local authorities of stopping people from leaving rather than commenting on the shelling itself. But as I said, we saw those horrific pictures there, and hospitals filling up as well with civilians, including children. Now, Mariupol is a city in the southeast of Russia, of Ukraine rather, as I said, and of strategic value to Russia because it connects Russian troops potentially in Donbass, in the cities, in the country's southeast, to the Crimean Peninsula, which was occupied by Russia in 2014. So a city of great strategic value for Russia, and it's come under intense shelling in recent days, with many civilian casualties. Now there's no power there, there's no water, there's no heating, and residents are saying there's no food. We've seen pictures of civilians raiding supermarkets, shelves empty in supermarkets across Mariupol now, and even after that shelling today, we could see pictures of civilians walking through the destruction, taking food that they'd raided from the local supermarket. That's just how desperate they were. So it's a terrifying crisis in Mariupol for citizens there.
So precarious and volatile, it seems. Sean, look, Russia's president has also issued this stark warning over the no-fly zones. What has he had to say, and what's he trying to achieve?
Well, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has been pleading with the NATO alliance to bring in a no-fly zone over Russia, essentially to stop the kinds of attacks that we're seeing in Mariupol. But NATO has rejected that, saying that would only escalate the war and potentially bring its member countries like the US and Canada and countries in Europe into war with Russia. Today, Russia's President Vladimir Putin essentially welcomed that and again criticised the harsh sanctions that Western countries have imposed on Russia, essentially saying that those sanctions themselves were bringing Western countries close to war anyway.
By the way, these sanctions that are being imposed, they are akin to declaring war. But thank God we haven't gotten there yet. I think our so-called quote-unquote partners still have an understanding of what the ramifications and threats to everybody could be.
Well, we're only 10 days into the war now, but cities and towns across Russia, like Mariupol, are under fierce attack, and around up to 1.5 million people have already fled Ukraine. Here in the city of Lviv, where I am, in western Ukraine, not far from the Polish border, it is filling up with displaced people as well. Trains full of people have come here, and the train station is jam-packed with people who are trying to get out of this country and get into Poland, which is only about 60 kilometres away.
Sean Rubinstein Dunlop, thank you so much for joining us from Lviv in Ukraine.